But otherwise, if people have any questions, I'll answer them now. And yeah, okay. Is there a guide on how to read parsers or watch good players' point of view? I always feel like I'm not understanding what I'm seeing. Unfortunately, I would say no. Not that I know of. I think the best thing you can do, and I honestly think that Final Fantasy XIV is very unique in this regard, in a good way, in a really, really good way, where Final Fantasy XIV has a mentor system set up, right? Face Temperance has a mentor system. The Balance has a mentor system. I'm not sure if anywhere else does, but you basically can get, like, you know, I know people like to meme mentors. Oh, sorry. I am not talking about in-game mentors. I want to be very clear here. I am not talking about the Burger King crown. We're talking about mentors in, like, Discord. Like, curated top players. But this is a system where you basically know that good players exist. They're readily available to you. And you can post VODs and stuff and just ask and be like, hey, I don't really know, like, I don't understand what you're doing here. Like, can you explain the differences in our gameplay and stuff like that? So, like, while it is really intimidating to read FF logs and analyze VODs, there is at least some sort of system for other players to help you out. And, like, yeah, sure, the top players in the game, a lot of them aren't mentors, but, like, it's still better than trying to figure it out on your own a lot of the time. And, like, worse, like, you can also ask me, like, my stream Discord, like, people ask stuff sometimes. People ask on stream, like, I'm sure top player Final Fantasy XIV streams you can always get good information with too as well. You can ask people on Twitter. I find that, like, a lot of Final Fantasy XIV players are very receptive to trying to help other players get good. So you just have to ask. And then once you work with them, you start getting better at reading FF logs. Like, you just ask, like, how did you know? Like, how do you see this? Like, how did you know that I cast less glares than you? Oh, like, I use the FF logs compare function. Then you start to learn that it exists. There isn't a single guide for it, although maybe that would be useful for the future. Do you have any tips for getting better at optimizing damage during prog? Not just parsing high on content that has been out for some time, but knowing how to optimize around mechanics as you learn them week 1 or 2. Yeah, that's a really good question. So tips for getting better at optimizing damage during prog. Okay, so I would still recommend optimizing your damage outside of prog. Simply because we don't get a lot of opportunities to prog. In an ideal world, we would have one of those opportunities in a month and a half, but we don't. The next time new content will come out that you can prog, I'm sorry to say it, is in 8 months. Right? So I would love to say, hey, yeah, you just practice by getting experience by actually doing it. But I'm sure a lot of good players want to get good in the... rather, a lot of newer players want to get good in the next 8 months. I've seen a lot of players who want to get into hardcore. They started playing during the 5.2 content drought or during 5.3. I'm sure a lot of new players are going to start playing during 5.4 and 5.5's content droughts as well. And some of them will have increased interest in hardcore gameplay. That's what I've seen. And I would say that step 1 would be make sure that you can consistently get good logs on all the current fights. I would say that consistently getting good logs in all sorts of fights, just practicing what it means to optimize and really understanding how your optimization works is integral to being able to do good optimization when doing blind prog as well. So for example, Summoner, right? Summoner optimization revolves around, like, whether you rush trance or not, and how you hold. Or actually, I don't know a lot about Summoner, but I know Summoner is, like, either do the 110-second rotation or the 120-second rotation. And, like, just putting yourself in different situations where you have to choose one over the other, and then also understanding why you choose one over the other, right? You can be a 99 percentile parser by just copying what other people do. But you should understand why you're doing the things you're doing in all different situations. And if you have that fundamental understanding of, like, again, why am I doing 110-second trance instead of 120-second trance? Like, if you understand why, then you're able to come up with that optimization on your own in blind prog when they come up with new situations, and that will improve your optimization ability. And the other way is to simulate prog. And this is what Honoka is saying in chat, what Frederica is saying in chat. So what you can do is you take off gear and do old content. So like, for example, let's go do Titan at mid eye level with no pants and no echo, obviously. And then you have to optimize, right? Especially if these are fights you haven't done before, especially if you're a new player. That experience is very valuable. Or you can come up with new mechanical challenges. So Face Temperance has mechanical challenges every so often, like competitions of like basically, hey, you do this content but harder. So recently they had one for the current tier where it was like do E10S, but you have to do all these mechanics differently. So that gives you an opportunity to simulate prog, right? This simulates prog by saying you have to do this mechanic in this really weird way. So now your movements are no longer muscle memory. Now you have to learn this mechanic, the new solution to the mechanic, and you can practice doing good damage while learning that new solution to said mechanic. Does that make sense? Like, basically what I'm saying here is there's two aspects to it. One is making sure that you're very, very familiar with optimizing your job and understanding how you optimize your job, just in general. Two is simulating prog scenarios so you get more experience with optimizing damage in prog scenarios. Because we get prog every 5 months or every 10 months, if you're talking about 2020 and 2021, you have to simulate it yourself. There's no other choice. Frankly, I would love to have a better solution. I would love to have a better answer for you. Like, I would love to say, oh yeah, you can just like go do ultimates and like ultimate's really good for optimizing your damage or something. But like, no, that doesn't exist. You have to get creative and you have to make things up. And the most common way I see is for people to make up mechanical challenges for themselves once they get beyond a certain level of comfort with their job. The other thing is play the game a lot. I said this before, but like, if you want to like do good damage before prog, play the game a lot for like the month or two before prog, so you really understand your job. That's really important. How can you tell how much of a lower parse is due to not being best in slot? I would check metrics such as, for example, if you play Black Mage, right? I would check metrics of how many Fire 4s did I get in this time span versus what the top ranking Black Mage got in the time span. Like, those are the types of things you want to think about. If you're a healer, you want to think about like how many glares did I get? Like, did I drop my dot? Like, did I do my rotation wrong? Stuff like that. Oh, the other thing you can do is you can compare your average hit. So what you can do is you can compare the amount of damage your auto attacks do compared to other top logs, and then you can find on average a general damage ratio. Let's say I'm not best in slot and my auto attacks do 100 damage. The best in slot player is doing 120 damage with their auto attacks. I can assume that on average they do 20% more damage than me, and then I can compare the DPS that way. It's not really foolproof. There's like, that's very up to variation as well as other things. But if you want a very, very base level understanding, you can do something like that. Can't really prepare too much for the first tier of an expansion. So the thing about that is I actually think you can. I think to prepare for the first tier of an expansion, what you do is, well, I guess you can only start preparing once the expansion comes out, but you just play the game a lot. You play the game a lot, like a lot. And those 4 weeks, the expansion comes out, 4 weeks later Savage comes out. Obviously you have to level your jobs, and then you just play the game a lot. Extremes over and over and over. Normals over and over and over. Know your job, know it in and out. Talk about theory, like get into theory crafting. Like, those are the things you can do to prepare. Now, they're not great, but I mean, like, do extreme trials with like no left side, and like, you know, it creates a real DPS check and a real healing check for you. Stuff like that. I don't know if it's possible to do without a full left side, but you know, stuff like that. That's what I would say. What if you practice a job a bunch because you want to get good at it and then they completely rework the rotation to 6.0? There are fundamentals to playing any role. That even if a job changes, those fundamentals are important. And I would say there's actually fundamentals, if you're talking about optimizing specifically, there are fundamentals that are universal between no matter what role you're playing. But let's just talk about role for a second. If you're playing healer, right, the fundamentals of optimizing as your healing GCDs and your healing tools, sure, your tools are important, but if you understand the fundamentals of the job, the role, the fundamentals of like being able to use as few healing GCs as possible and moving your tools to cover everything. The fundamentals of moving as little as possible as a white mage or as a caster in general. The fundamentals of playing a melee and getting as many GCD uptime and greeting as hard as you can without ever messing up. Like, these are all fundamentals to doing good damage in prog that will basically carry forever, right? I also think that if you're worried about that, you can practice getting good at multiple jobs, right? Let's say I'm a healer player, because I am, and I want to really get good at doing damage as healer. What you can do is you can practice getting good at doing damage as white mage, doing damage as scholar, and doing damage as astro. And I would call it, to me, those skills are like a Venn diagram. And in the intersection of that Venn diagram are skills that you're training of getting good at the healer role. All the healers have different tools, but you're still getting good at using healer tools in general if you can optimize all the healers. And all the melee are the same way, and all the tanks are the same way, and all the casters are the same way. And I'm not going to talk about physical ranged. Honestly, there's like a lot of stuff that I didn't even cover. I think I mostly covered like mechanical and DPS stuff, but there's like stuff in here that I didn't cover that, like, to be a good Final Fantasy XIV player, you have to like be emotionally stable. Or that's not true. You have to be how do I describe it? I would say you find more success as a Final Fantasy XIV player, especially in top end rating, if you are emotionally mature, not stable. If you can handle personal conflict in an intelligent manner, if you don't tilt super hard, if you don't tilt your team, you'll get more success. There are good players out there with terrible attitudes, and they just like, people don't like playing with them, and then the groups end up blowing up, and they don't do well in the long term. And it's because they're just like unhinged. And like, that maturity is really important for being a good player. I mean, it's really important for any team activity. But I didn't really cover it in this guide because I didn't want to go into it. How do you cope with stress in prog? Do I get stress in prog? I feel like I don't really get stress in prog. Okay, the basis of a stress for me is that there's something that you desperately want. For example, the stress of losing your job because you desperately need money to live, right? And I would say, like, if you're a world first raider, there's like stress in prog because you desperately want to get world first. You desperately want to clear really quickly, right? So there's like some sort of strong desire is like the root of stress. And I think for me, while I do want to clear fast, I don't really like have the desire to get world first. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, it'd be nice if it happened, but like, I'm not stressing out about getting world first because it's like not even something that I'm actively super hard aiming for. Because if you think about it, right, like, I mean, I stream my prog. If I were gonna stress about getting world first and like doing really well in prog, I probably wouldn't be streaming my prog, right? The fact that I stream my prog to me like is indicative of like my mindset where like I kind of don't take prog like so incredibly seriously that I would stress out about it. So like personally, I don't really stress. If we don't clear very fast most of the time too, for me, like if I'm making mistakes, then I like, again, like I have this very solution oriented mindset where I'm just like, okay, I need to focus up. No, I need to do better, right? Like I need to figure out my mistake. I need to like reflect internally. I'm very focused on that. And then if other people are messing up, then like I don't get stressed about other people messing up. I just get annoyed. And then like if someone's like really bad, I can't think of it. This never really happened. But if someone was like really bad, I would probably in my mind just think to myself like, yeah, well, lesson learned for next tier. I guess we're kicking this person and recruiting someone else. And like, that's it. That's all it would be. And then like, you know, you kind of need to take your losses where they are and like look ahead to the next tier, I think, when like things go wrong. I can't say like what it means to handle your stress in prog because I don't get super stressed in prog. I get tons of adrenaline. For prog. That's because I'm excited. You get stressed as a healer specifically because you think healer can always save a run. Well, that's true. You just need to learn not to blame yourself. be on a reasonable level. Like even if a healer could have saved a run, you can both feasibly understand I could have saved the run. However, this was largely this other person's fault for messing it up in the first place. Both of those things can be true at the same time, and you can accept that, and I think that should help you be less stressed. Doing UCOB, you're learning a lot on the law of stuff that I missed when you first started healing. UCOB is a really, I would say that like UCOB is like a really good way to just like, if you want to start getting good at the game and you want something to push you to get good, there are a few, okay, here are a few other tips that I didn't really talk about in the guide. Special Twitch only tips. One of the best ways to get good at anything is to play with people better than you. I think one of the best ways to accelerate your gameplay about getting good at Final Fantasy. Smile. Okay, thank you for the 2 months. Is to just play with people who are better than you and seeing what they do. Seeing how infrequently they mess up. If you're put in the spotlight, let's say you mess up 5 times per night and you're in a raid group where everyone messes up 5 times per night and you're just like, oh yeah, you know, I'm pretty good. Get into a group where everyone only messes up 1 time per night. Your mistakes will just be highlighted really hard. And like that kind of is a forcing function to force you to be better. Doing ultimate is a forcing function to force you to be better. Things that you could get away with. Like, you know, the game, yeah, sure, you're doing things wrong, but it doesn't really punish you super hard in Savage, right? Maybe you just die every so often. Not a big deal. You die, you mess up intermediate relativity, you might kill one other person. You might get hit by double APOC. Not a big deal, you know, your consistency is good enough to clear consistently. Step into ultimate, that doesn't fly anymore. You're causing wipes left and right. You realize that you have to up your consistency, right? So I would say doing harder content and playing with better people really helps you be better. UCOB is a pretty hard first ultimate, I think, for people. I mean, UU is definitely the easiest one. But I'm like a little bit of a fan of like being thrown into the fire. I think that really teaches you to be good. Like for me, I cleared Delta Escape week 4, which I think for any hardcore player, you'd be like, week 4, like, wow, that's pretty slow. I cleared UCOB on patch, right? UCOB forced me to be good. UCOB really, 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 really forced me to be good. Because, like, oh, God, I can't even explain. I think I did UCOB for, like, man, I did UCOB for, must have been at least 200 hours. I think another really important skill that I didn't highlight in the guide is you have to know what's coming next. You have to be able to think about, like, Final Fantasy XIV, one of the fundamentals of Final Fantasy XIV is planning. You have to be able to plan into the future. You have to be able to think about, like, what's coming next? How am I going to use my tools? Like, pre-positioning, for example, as a white mage. Pre-positioning so that, like, I am near where I have to be to do the mechanic, right? If I know Protean Wave is coming up, then I'm trying to pre-position near my Protean Wave spot, right? Like, those are very fundamental skills to playing Final Fantasy XIV that I kind of didn't really talk about, but they kind of show up in guides. What should we look out for when trialing people for our statics, besides usual stuff like how well they gel and how good reliable they are? God, it depends. How well they adjust, like how flexible they are. Attitude is the biggest one I look for personally. Like, I want to play with someone who's like communicative and like able to tackle problems. Like I would hate to play with someone who has problems but doesn't say anything about them. Man, if you are recruiting, I really think that good attitude is so important. I think like skill is like something that you can kind of tell. Like, you only get a limited view of skill through trialing, and like you can usually go over every single mistake that someone makes. That's what we did when we trialed. We pretty much like we talked about it after, and we would just like basically talk about every single mistake that they made. So like, and honestly, like in my experience, when you're trying skill wise, oops, I fat fingered in dumb. When you're trialing skill wise, in my experience with the people we trialed, a lot of them were pretty similar. Like, when we're trialing, most of the players are like, yeah, they're pretty good. They made a mistake here or there, but otherwise they're solid players. Like, how do you differentiate between all of them, right? I think, like, attitude is really important. Like, if you trial someone and you ask them to do something, it's really important for them to be like, if I'm like, hey, can you move your cooldown here? They'll be like, yeah. Or, like, for them to be communicative, be like, oh, I have lightning in nail. Like, let's say you're trialing a main tank, right? it's really important for your main tank to be like, oh, I'm lightning, communication, that kind of thing. Or like, if they mess up, what do? Do they blame you? Do they say nothing? Do they say my bad and like fix their mistake? Like, those are things to be looking out for, I think. All right, guys, I'm gonna go drive and pick up some McDonald's. So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the stream, follow, please. Subscribe to me on YouTube. I'm pivoting to make up more YouTube content, so subscribe to my YouTube channel. This is the last plug of today. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Oh, you can also follow me on Twitter. I got my Twitter, I got YouTube, and then I have Discord. You can always catch me on Discord if you ever have any questions like about the guide, or you just want to join our community. You can join our Discord server there. I hope to see you guys sometime again.